Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm so excited to be able to share this presentation with you. This presentation is Tarot for Writers, which is being presented by the wonderful Kris Waldherr. Kris has books for both adults and children, which include Unnatural Creatures, a novel of the Frankenstein woman, The Lost History of Dreams, Bad Princess, Doomed Queens, and the Book of Goddesses, and many, many more. Kris is also the creator of the Goddess Tarot, which has over 250,000 copies in print and teaches the tarot to writers and other creatives. Kris works and lives in Brooklyn. And today, Kris will be giving a presentation about tarot.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Basil. I'm really excited to share. And I should mention that I've been teaching tarot to writers since 2019, before the pandemic. So it's been interesting that I had to reorient to teaching on Zoom. So I've got lots of great material. And the hard part was limiting it down to what can I share and not overwhelm you all. So let's begin. And I think we should begin by choosing a card. Are you fine with that, Basil?
Absolutely, let's do it.
Okay, do you have a question, like a creative question or something about you're working on or otherwise? And I'm using the Rider-Waite-Smith Tarot, which is the most popular tarot deck in the world. And it's kind of what I think of as a skeleton of every modern tarot deck that's now available. And I'll talk a little bit about that during my presentation. So basically, if you know the Rider-Waite-Smith, it's like knowing the anatomy of all tarot decks. So that's what I'm working with. And we have a jumper. That's when a card has so much energy it wants to share. And the funny thing is that, whoops, I'm trying to get it so you can see it. I have the Knight of Cups, which is about an offering, a creative offering. So how perfect is that?
Absolutely, that's amazing. It's actually kind of funny because the Knight of Cups has been following me this entire week. So,
Well, he says, hi, I'm still here. Pay attention to me. It's so funny. I've seen that happen so many times when I read for people. And I read for, I don't even know how many I've been reading now for like 35 years. And I've done it at conferences where there's been like hundreds of people, and I've done it in one-on-one sessions, kind of like what we're doing here, though we're sharing with all these people. So it's a little bit of a conundrum. So do you have a particular question in mind? And I can kind of break down how the cards work.
yeah, let me think. I guess my creative question would be, should I work on my writing today? I have a lot of writing projects, but I'm specifically thinking of a fandom event that I'm in, and I'm trying to decide if I
Okay.
should do that or not.
All right. So first things first, I would love to rephrase your question because yes or no questions are a little tricky for the tarot. I think maybe a way to say that would be, what will be the outcome if I work on my writing today? What can I expect?
Okay, that
All
works.
right, so I'm going to shuffle the cards and you tell me when you're ready for me to stop. We've already had the Knight of Cups show up to say hi, so hopefully somebody else will show up.
Okay, that seems good.
All right, okay. So should I choose from the top or from the middle or from the bottom? What's your pleasure?
Let's do the top.
Okay. So, and here we are. I'm like, whoa, where is it going? We have the Two of Cups, and I'll break this down for people who maybe are not familiar at all with the tarot. I know that you said you understand the tarot. So this is a minor arcana card, which is similar to kind of like a playing card that there's four suits and they're numbered as well as court cards like playing cards. I'll get into that later in my presentation. But cups have to do with creativity and but also about kind of being receptive to creativity. They're different than other suits, which I'll talk more about that in a bit, but it's more about being receptive and taking in and almost like a visitation from the muses. So I interpret this card that if you do work today, you can expect to receive some nice offerings from the muses and they'll be happy you showed up. So that what I would take is definitely, yeah, spend some time communing with your muses and be receptive and kind of fall in love with whatever they have to offer you. So I'm going to do some screen sharing and I'll give a quick overview of the tarot. and I'll try and kind of come out a little bit because I know that PowerPoints can be a little overwhelming, but it's the easiest way to get a lot of information out. And I have a lot of information, though I'll try not to let it drag too much. So let's begin. All right, so let's go. So Basil already gave you an introduction about what I do, and here's some of my books. And some of my tarot decks, besides the Goddess Tarot, I also created the Lover's Path Tarot, which takes love stories from around the world and applies it to tarot. And I've also created some oracle decks as well. So this is one of them. More recently, I have a book called Tarot for Storytellers, which is coming out this summer, which basically takes all of the classes I've been teaching for the last 5 years and puts it in book form. And it covers everything from character creation using the tarot to working at plot points, dealing with writer's block. And so I'm excited to finally have everything I've been teaching available in this way. And so what is the tarot? I think hopefully you got a little bit of a sense of what it was with my just pulling a card here and there. And everybody knows the tarot, I think, just from pop culture. You know, let's face it, if there's a movie and somebody pulls a tarot card, a lot of times there's a lot of either very ominous, like it's, oh my goodness, death has shown up, something's going to happen, or it's happy, like they've chosen the lovers, and that means there's going to be a wonderful love affair. The tarot isn't quite that overt. It's a little more subtle in the way that the symbolism is, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So at its most basic, tarot is a card deck made of 78 cards. They all have pictures on them, and you can use those pictures in a number of ways. There are assigned meanings, so to speak, but they're very fluid. Some people use these pictures in a more intuitive way, which is about kind of seeing how you respond to the pictures and what memories they jolt in you or emotions. So the way that I work with the tarot, it's a bit of both, and I'll talk a little bit about that later on. So I think most people feel that the tarot is something you use for predictive purposes, but there's other ways it can be used, especially writing. So the first thing to say is that the tarot is based into two different parts called arcanas, and I'll cover that more in a bit. I first want to talk a little bit more, go deeper about how you can use the tarot. At its most basic, tarot has two schools of thought. The first is predictive, which is kind of the most famous way that people know about the tarot. I like to think of the tarot, it kind of tells you what you already know. It just presents it in a form so that you can see it in a more detached way. It's like a mirror for you. And I think of it as an adventure to truth seeking rather than soothsaying. Though I have to say, I've read for so many people over the years, and I have had predictive instances. Like, for example, a woman I read for, I had no idea, and she was dealing with infertility, and I pulled the Queen of Pentacles, which is associated with fertility and pregnancy. The next day she learned she was pregnant. So that was pretty cool. The other school is psychological, and it's tarot reading as a therapeutic experience because it gives us an experience of synchronicity, which is when you can kind of take different aspects in your world and combine them to find meaning for yourself. You interpret these series of seemingly random events as a whole to find greater meaning. And I think that we naturally do that as humans. We're always looking for meaning. Something as simple as, it's funny, every time I go get my hair done, it always rains. And I feel like there's something symbolic there, but I'm not sure what it is. Like, you know, best laid plans, maybe, I don't know. So that's another way that you can approach the tarot as more psychological, intuitive, sort of as a way to kind of sense how you're feeling about something or what you're thinking about something. Again, a mirror. So synchronicity, it makes the tarot perfect for exploring our subconscious, which as writers, we all know how rich that is and how our best ideas often come from that out of the blue, and invoking intuition, sparking inspiration, definitely. The one thing I always tell my students is that if there's one thing you can take away from my classes is trust your intuition. The tarot is a tool for helping us do so. As writers, it can help us make up plots, develop and deepen characters. It's also feedback as we write and revise. Many times I felt blocked on something while I'm working on a manuscript. What I'll do is I'll just pull a tarot card, asking a question simple as like, hey, what should I do about this plot point? Or is there something I haven't considered? Or what's the best way for me to move forward on this? Also, this is a great tool. You can use it to dissolve writer's block because it gives you, again, another opinion, a mirror to whatever's going on to help you kind of get past that ruminating thoughts. If you're like me when you're writing, you overthink and you overthink and you overthink. Pull a card, kind of cuts to the chase. Finally, because the tarot is image-based, meaning each card has a picture on it, you can use it for something called ekphrastic writing, writing inspired by art. That's the most direct way that you can use tarot, is that you can just choose a number of cards and use it to make a story. And I'll have a little exercise about how you can go about doing that later. This term comes from the Greek word ekphrasis. It's a written description of a visual work of art. And tarot it's just all of these wonderful pictures on cards. Nothing mystical about it in that way. It's symbols, imagery, archetypes, all the things we love working with as writers, only in visual form. Also, it's a nonlinear form of storytelling. 78 cards. Every time you shuffle the cards, you get a different story. So there are all these possibilities. And I don't know if anyone remembers those old books from the 80s of the Choose Your Own Adventure, where you would go to one page and it would say, if you want to take the elevator, go to page 25. If you want to go out on the street, go to page 45. Tarot was kind of like that. Depending what you choose, you get a different possibility. Now, this is a quote I love, and I first heard this quote when I was in college years ago, and it was about fairy tales and about how fairy tales have different story blocks, if you will, or pieces, and depending on how you combine them, you get a different story. So J.R. Tolkien, author of Lord of the Rings, this is from a lecture he gave at Oxford, and I just love this quote. It says, "We may say the pot of soup, the cauldron of story has always been boiling, and to we have continually been adding new bits, dainty and undainty," which that cracks me up. Like, what's a dainty bit? Does it mean like, you know, salmon, or I don't know, or something expensive versus undainty? I don't even know what that would be. But if we speak of a cauldron, we must not wholly forget the cooks. So when we read tarot, we become the cooks stirring the cauldron. Every time you shuffle the decks, that cauldron is going to be a little different depending what you pull up. For inspiration, most obvious thing is just choose a card. If you are feeling like, I don't know what this card means, just don't even worry about that at this point. I always think, especially for those who are new to the tarot, just go by the images and use it to see what you feel, what sparks in you, any memories, any thoughts. Set a timer, make a list of everything you can think of, no matter how ridiculous it seems. You can use the card as a tool for meditation. You just put the card in a place where you can look at it and spend a few minutes just kind of letting your eyes focus out, like almost blurring it, and letting yourself space out and see what comes. Set a timer for 5 minutes. This is a great one if you're feeling writer's block, because I think that the smaller the task, the less intimidating it is. I always tell my, coaching clients that, write 100 words, nothing more. Just make it as accessible as possible. Make it as small a task, what's the word I'm looking for? A barrier, as you will, to entry. So you set a timer for 5 minutes and you force yourself to write until it rings. Challenge yourself to see how many words you can get down using this card for inspiration. You may get a story, you may have a memory, or you may just describe what you see. It's all good. The point is just to get writing. This is another one that I'm surprised more people don't talk about this who work with the tarot, but it's so simple. You begin by posing a question to the cards and you take it from there. It's like you are talking with a friend. I always say that depending on what tarot deck you're working with, they have different personalities and they talk in different ways. And sometimes when I'm working with the cards, they get chatty. So this is a way to take advantage of that. Asking a question. I think I touched a little bit before about how yes or no questions can be a little tricky, because the tarot is more about gray and nuance rather than yes or no or black or white, or, there's not really an absolute art. It's something that it allows us to explore, which is what makes it so wonderful. So I think I'm going to try that with you, Basil, if you're fine with that. I can show you how that works. So let's have a conversation with the cards. And before you asked about what would happen, whether you should work or not, and do you have any questions, or should I think of one for how we could have a conversation with the cards? And I'll show you how this technique works. And we have more jumpers, but I'm not going to get into that for this.
I mean, do you want me to ask a question along the same lines as before,
It
or?
is entirely up to you. We can explore anything, something that is kind of open-ended, so I can show you how this have a conversation works. Because basically, we're going to see what the cards have to say and explore.
Let me see. Can I ask a question like, how will today go?
Sure. How will today go? And you let me know when you want me to stop.
Okay.
Do I take from the top or from the middle?
Let's do the middle this time.
All right, living dangerously. We have the sun, which is one of the most positive cards in the deck. It's about creativity, it's about sharing with the world and feeling really optimistic. It's also a major arcana card, which I'll talk about in a moment. Those are the cards that have the names of archetypes, so to speak, and pictures of them. Um, Also about like teaching and sometimes children, but it's more just about getting that creativity out into the world. So what's your follow-up question from there based on what this card has to say?
Uh, hmm. I think one question that comes to mind, although I don't know if this is too specific, is like, what
Go.
sort of happiness awaits me today?
Oh, what sort of I love that you expect happiness because you asked what sort of happiness rather than will I be happy? But then again, that's a yes or no questions which aren't so suited for nuance. Let me know when you want me to stop.
Okay.
Whoops. And
Mhm.
cut and top, bottom. What do you think?
Uh, hmm. Let's try bottom.
All right. Okay, we have the Queen of Wands. Whoops, I'm like, where is it? There she
There we go.
is. I think I'd have to remember to put her in front of me. You're just going to feel really creative. Wands are different than cups in that they're also about creativity, but it's more about activity and sharing it with the world. And the Queen of Wands is somebody that she's very articulate, she's very clever. And I think you're going to feel really inspired as you're right. I think that's the happiness that's going to await you. And you're going to just feel very empowered. And do you have any
Great.
cats? Sometimes the cards are very literal. If you have any cats, they'll be around. She's got her little black cat
Unf-
there.
Unfortunately, no. All my friends have cats, but I'm allergic, so I just live
Oh,
vicariously through them. And every time they post their cat, I'm like, please pet your cat for me.
oh. Well, I have to tell you, my husband is allergic to cats, but there are some hypoallergenic breeds, and we've managed to. I mean, the allergies never fully go away, but we've managed to work with that. But you can enjoy them through your friends. So, any other follow-up questions from there about happiness or your day, or is the conversation complete?
See, it's complete. This seems like a pretty good day for me.
I think so too. But you can also use this to ask about plot questions and character questions, whatever you like while you're writing. So that is a really simple way to use the tarot that doesn't involve memorizing, putting out the cards in specific formats and stuff, which can be a little intimidating for people who are new to the tarot. So, all right, so I'm going to do a little more screen sharing. So that is, I love this method and I use it quite a bit. Finally, I touched on this a little bit about how every time you shuffle, you get a different story. So play Exquisite Corpse. I don't know how many of you have heard about Exquisite Corpse. It came from the Surrealist movement in the early 20th century, but they would play these games where instead of using words, they would draw a picture and nobody else would see the picture they were working on, and they would kind of pass it around until they got this crazy work of art. But in this instance, we'll use the cards to symbolize different part of a story. So you choose one card, you start writing your story. choose another card. You're at the next part of your story, and so on until you have a story that maybe it's not something that you would necessarily use, but it just gets the juices flowing creatively. So that is another great way to work with the tarot for writers. Again, every time you shuffle the cards, you get a new story. So I mentioned earlier that I'm working with the Rider-Waite-Smith or the Rider-Waite Tarot, depending on how it's marketed. It's usually marketed as the Rider Tarot. It was created by a woman named Pamela Coleman Smith. Her nickname was Pixie, which I love, but she looks kind of pixie-ish. She was born in London to American parents and spent time of her childhood in Jamaica. And she was also a children's book illustrator and did all sorts of amazing things. But what she's mainly known for is the wonderful art that she created for this tarot deck. It's the most popular tarot deck in the world. So most tarot decks use her structure, if you will. Because the one thing that Pixie brought to the tarot that was not available before was she put illustrations on every single card, not just the major arcana, which I'll talk about in a moment. So let me go deeper in that, and I'll show you why that is so important. And here's some examples of decks. Not so much the Thoth deck, though it has some overlap with the Rider-Waite. My Goddess Tarot definitely uses the structure of the Rider-Waite. The Gaian Tarot, which is another deck I love. The Aquarian Tarot, which I learned to work on because I actually took illustration classes with David Palladini when I was in art school way back when. So again, so what is the tarot? 70 cards, 2 arcanas. First arcana, major arcana, 22 cards, numbered 0 through 21. It's a story cycle. It begins with the Fool, numbered 0, and ends with the World. So just from that alone, you can kind of tell where it's going. We begin with inexperience and we gain experience. The second arcana, minor arcana, 56 cards. It's like a playing card deck because it has 4 suits. And this is how those break down. Whoops, hold on. There's cups, wands, swords, pentacles. But the major arcana differs from the minor arcana because each of the cards bear a name, an archetype, if you will. And you can see these here that they range from the Fool, the Magician, the High Priestess, the Empress, and so on. And what I love about them is that once you get to know these cards, you can definitely see the cycle. It's kind of like the hero's journey, which is a cycle where we begin with somebody entering the world, maybe not knowing so much, in need of wisdom, and they gain the tools they need as they go along and they triumph. If you've seen the Star Wars films, they all use the major arcana because they're kind of obsessed with it, rather not the major arcana of the hero's journey, they're kind of obsessed with it. But I love is that authors Gail Carringer and Theodore Goss, they offer an alternative called The Heroine's Journey, which isn't so much about triumphing over the various aspects of the world as much as building community. So here's how the hero's journey works. And I'm sure that if you want to go deeper with that, there's lots of resources online. And when you look about it, it's kind of like the way the major arcana looks at it. Begins with all of these different steps going on, or in a circle, in a cycle. It's a story cycle again. Very quickly, this is how it works. We have the Fool, in which the hero or heroine sets out. The Magician is the call to adventure or the inciting event, if you will. And then the hero or the heroine, they meet mentors and other figures who will help or hinder their quest. So we have the High Priestess, the Empress, the Emperor, the Hierophant. And I know that these are all kind of very like old school illustrations in a way, but there are lots of tarot decks that use the symbolism update to make it more modern with non-binary figures, as well as some even, I mean, I've seen everything for the tarot for gummy bears, believe it or not, to, vampires. So if this imagery doesn't speak to you, there's lots of decks out there that probably will, but this is basically Tarot 101, what the images are based on, the Rider-Waite-Smith. So from here, after the Fool, the hero or the heroine, aka the Fool, goes through and gains their allies and people to help them, they find somebody who's going to accompany them. and that's the Lovers. Then finally they leave and they enter the world where they will be challenged with a chariot. Their strength, where they're challenged along the way. The Hermit, which is when they kind of withdraw to gain wisdom because it's kind of too much for them. But then once they re-enter the world, they find that there's a lot more randomness involved, and fate may or may not be in their favor. But karma takes over with justice, for better or worse. After justice, we move to the Hanged Man, which isn't about what most people think. They think, oh my goodness, they're being executed. It's not about that. It's based on the myth of Odin, how he hung himself upside down in order to gain wisdom. And it also usually symbolizes that, not necessarily a setback, but you just can't move forward because you need to gain some resources before you can. And then comes death, which isn't necessarily, again, literally death. It's more about, you know what, something isn't working, let it go, let's start over. Finally, balance is found and helpers arrive. I love this card. It's so beautiful. You see that the figure has 1 foot in the water and 1 foot on the earth. It's about the balance between the emotional and the physical. And they're there kind of, pouring their waters between the cups. And it's just very much about, mastery in that way. So from this portrait of balance, we go to imbalance, which is the devil. And if you look back at the Lovers, here we have the one vision of the Lovers, and here we have another, where whatever it was that drew them together has been just used to enslave them in a way. So how do you get past that? That's where we have the Tower, where everything is kind of brought back to the foundation. You're forced to start over. But as the Oscar Wilde quote goes, I may be in the gutter, but I can see the stars. And I love this card. Again, you notice that how the figure is pouring water between heaven and earth. After that, we move to the Moon, where things seem darkest, like the dark night of the soul, as they say in story structure, and they're forced to confront their innermost doubts. And then we have the Sun, which is about creativity and sharing with the world and just feeling very optimistic and open, which leads to Judgment, where the hero, heroine, and judge emerged or not. But according to the world, they are triumphant. And then the cycle begins anew, where a new fool begins their journey, the hero or heroine. So that is the major arcana. Now, for the minor arcana, which expresses the hero's return to the monomyth, each minor arcana suit represents energies that develop in the world. We have cups, wands, swords, pentacles. Depending on your tarot deck, they may call this something different. Some call it, like for example, wands could be called rods, could be called fire because it's associated with the element of fire. Swords, in my Lover's Path tarot, the swords are arrows, like Cupid's arrow. So basically, if you understand what they symbolize, no matter what tarot deck you choose, there's still that connection. Cups, emotion, inspiration, that first flush of inspiration. It almost feels like a visitation from the muses, where you get this idea and you just know what you need to do, but you haven't done it yet. Also, a lot of times when cups show up, it's really about our relationships we have with people. How are we connected with them? How do they make us feel? How do we build community? The question I always think of with the Suit of Cups is, what are you inspired to create? Then we have the Suit of Wands, action and movement, a different kind of inspiration. What gets us out in the world with our idea? They're the first flush of activity and growth on a project. A lot of times when wands show up, it's about finding others to help us bring our idea into the world and to inspire us and to support us. So the question with wands is, what action must you take to bring your creation into the world? Swords can be about intellect and limitations. I always call this the editor suit, that when swords show up, they're telling you what to do. It's like, you got to cut this back. This isn't working. Or maybe you want to think about this in a different way. And they invite us to gain knowledge. Sometimes I feel like they're the step backward after 2 steps forward for creative project. It can be frustrating, but they're really necessary. The one analogy I always use when it comes to swords is that it's like if you have this beautiful plant that you're growing and it gets to be really unwieldy, you're going to have to prune it back so it can bear fruit or to flower. So that's what cups offer us. It's what we need. It may not be pleasant at the time, but in the long run, it's in our best interest as writers and creatives. So the question with a suit of swords is, how would the world respond to your creation? And finally, we have the suit of pentacles, which is the physical world. Manifestation is what I always say. After you go through the cups, wands, and swords, then we get pentacles, which is everything you've been working on in terms of creation comes into the world, into fruition. So pentacles are about the harvest that arrive after you take your inspiration and make it real in the world. So the question for this is, how does your inspiration manifest in the world? So what I always love to say to people who get overwhelmed by the tarot, who are new to it and say, 78 cards, how am I going to memorize every single meaning? You don't have to. As long as you understand, is it a major or a minor arcana? Is it a suit that you understand what that meaning is? Do you know what playing cards are? Do you know playing cards? You know 56 cards of the tarot, you're already so far ahead. And there are a lot of corollaries between the minor arcana and the playing cards. So think of cups as hearts, wands as clubs, swords as pentacles, rather swords as spades, and pentacles as diamonds. And the only big difference between the playing cards and the minor arcana is that instead of having 3 court cards, which in playing cards are Jack, Queen, King, there's 4. I'll talk about that in a moment. But otherwise, there's 10 numbered cards. And remember what I said about Pixie earlier and why her tarot deck was so radical? It's because she was the first artist to put a picture on the numbered cards, what they also call the pips. Before this, if you worked with a tarot deck, it was usually a Marseille deck, you would have only the images of cups on these numbered cards. So there would be like 1 cup or 2 cups or 3 cups. What Pixie did was she created an illustration to give us something to use story-wise. So you could see how it progresses here, that there's a story where you have the Ace of Cups, which is the first offering, inspiration, 2 of Cups, somebody who joins you and there's like a relationship. And this can symbolize love, it could just symbolize inspiration. 3, which is a sense of celebration. 4, which is too much celebration. The person gets kind of bored with it and they're just like done with it. 5, which is there's a sense of sorrow where they're looking upon what they lack rather than what they have. Because you can see the 2 cups are standing behind the figure, like in the 2 of Cups. So there's still, cups there, even if they're crying over the cups that have spilled. 6 of Cups, where you learn to appreciate what you do have. 7 of Cups, where there's so many ideas and inspiration, but you have to choose. 8 of Cups, you move on because you're ready for the next part of your adventure and you've made your choice. 9 of Cups, which is basically, appreciating what you have and celebrating. And then 10 of Cups, where you join with community. And then the cycle begins again. So if you look at every one of the 4 minor arcana suits, you'll see the same kind of story. Again, back to the court cards being like the major, the playing cards. With the tarot, we have Page, Knight, Queen, King for the court cards. Depending on your tarot deck, it might be different. The Goddess Tarot has Prince, Princess, King, and Queen. My queens are always the highest in the Goddess Tarot because that's how it should be. So to bring this all together to end my presentation, again, 70 cards, you don't have to memorize every one of those meanings. This is how I teach my students to break it down. First question, is it a major or minor arcana card? Second question, if it's a minor arcana card, what suit is it? Is it a numbered card or a court card? Third is, what's your initial emotional response to the card? And don't overthink this. Like if there's one word that comes to you, just grab it. Fourth is, because most tarot decks have images, you look and see, are there people in the card? Who are they? Are they young and old, rich or poor? Which way are they facing? What are they doing? What does their position suggest to you? 5, are there any animals in the cards? If so, what are they doing? There is a lot of animals in tarot decks, and I love seeing them because I just love animals so much. And the sixth question is there a landscape or architectural structure in the card? What time of day is it? Weather, and so on. And the final question, which is to my mind the most important when you're connecting with tarot cards for the first time, is when you look at the card, what memories or experiences come to you? If the card has a personal person or a animal on it, do they remind you of anyone in your life? And finally, there's no right or wrong answer. It's just, what does it say to you? And I'm going to stop my screen sharing there so we can talk for a minute. I know it's a lot of information, and I've just basically touched a little bit of it, but I hope it gets you feeling less intimidated by the cards and eager to dive in.
It was a really informative presentation, and I'm sure everyone is listening to this has learned a lot about tarot. And I think I definitely agree with you that one of the things that tends to keep people from getting into tarot is being intimidated by the sheer number of cards and all the meanings. And just finding a deck that resonates with you. My sibling actually has two decks, three, I don't remember. I have one. Um, I also have like the Rider-Waite in a digital form. I know some people who have like a version where all the images are cats because that really resonates with them, and it's super cute, and all the cats are doing various chores or whatnot. So it's just about finding what works for you, and I think that was really illustrated through your presentation, which was a wonderful experience. So thank you.
Oh, I'm so glad. Well, I always also, another piece of advice is just think of each deck is like visiting with a different friend. And depending on what you're going to be asking about, if you want to have multiple decks, I know some people who have many, many decks, it becomes a little addictive. But I know that depending on the question I want to ask the cards, there are certain decks I prefer. Like the Guy Tarot, which I mentioned earlier, is really great when I have any kind of like financial questions or pragmatic questions about being in the world. The Goddess Tarot I find is really great for any kind of creative questions. And the Rider-Waite I kind of think of as it's like a slap of the deck because the images can be so intimidating, but it'll tell you what you need to know if you're desperate enough. But I've been working with it more and more, I think, kind of as a result of the pandemic. I'm more eager for, if there's something I need to know, just tell me.
Definitely, definitely. And so as we reach the end of this presentation, uh, Kris, would you like to share places where people can find you online or anything that you'd like to just sort of promote in this moment?
Oh, thank you. That's lovely. Yeah, they can always find me on my website at kriswaldherrbooks.com. And the main thing I want to mention is, that this, by the time we have, oops, here we go again. I got the prototypes for the book recently from the printer. And by the time this is out in the world, our little presentation, this should be also out in the world. So I hope you'll check it out. If you've liked what I've shown you, this goes far, far, far deeper. And thank you so much for having me. It's been really wonderful. I love sharing the tarot, and especially for writers, I think the tarot is such a natural fit for the way that our brains work.
Absolutely, absolutely. I can tell that that's going to be an excellent resource for writers. Um, So, yeah, everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. If you have any questions for Kris, you can, if you're viewing this during the conference, you can ask your questions in the server. If you're viewing this after the fact, well, you'll have to find another method to ask Kris a question. But thank you so much for joining us today. Have a great day.
Thank
Bye.
you.